Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Make Others Successful, a podcast where we share insights, stories, and strategies to help you build a better workplace and get more out of your Microsoft 365 subscription. I'm Matt, I'm here with Mike and Michaela, and we're gonna talk everything Power Platform and AI. This podcast is gonna be a little bit different in that we are gonna have kind of a front half and a back half. The first part, we're gonna talk a little bit about how you might think about a business process and how you might think about automating it or improving it with technology. And then once we kind of talk about that and talk about it in the context of Power Platform generically, how you might solve that problem, then we're gonna switch it around and say, okay, cool. How should we think about solving that with AI? So let's get right into it. Mike, do you wanna set us up a little bit with the story about the business and the process that we're trying to automate?
Sure. So I'm not going to be very specific here. We're going to try to keep it generic. Think of a relatively simple scenario like an IT request process. So maybe a request for the use of some software or a request for a new hardware device or something like that. And maybe you're managing that process with a shared mailbox or just emails to the IT team, like, hey, I want to use this thing, or can you allow me to install this software on my machine or something like that. And typically stuff like that, especially in a larger organization, has to go through some sort of approval process. And then while you're waiting on the approval, you have maybe no idea what's going on. And then you follow up with another email and you say, hey, did you get my request, right? Maybe there wasn't even an acknowledgement. So there's all kinds of problems with that process. And then ultimately, once it's like actually approved and then you can go install it, somebody needs to let you know about that, and somebody probably ought to document the fact that we approved it and that you installed it, right? And there's all of those other follow-on things that need to happen. And so that's a pretty common problem, because if you have an organization with any number of people, you're managing all sorts of different things from all different people because they all do different things. And it would be a lot better if you could track that in a more formal way. And so there are ways we can do that inside the Power Platform. I don't know, Michaela, is that something?
Yeah, so I think if you're running this out of a mailbox, like you said, Mike, who has access to the mailbox is one of our first problems. We need to make sure everybody who should be in it is in it. We're tracking things based on maybe subject of the email. It's rather disorganized. There's no standard, maybe form. We need to collect information about all of the, equipment that we're reviewing and its use case maybe. And so it seems very non-standardized, disorganized, honestly, if we're doing it out of a mailbox. We don't have a source to go to.
So in those scenarios, a lot of the things you talked about are really pain points for the people receiving the request, right?
Right.
So they're like, hey, I get these requests in different formats and I have to deal with that. Or maybe somebody marked it as read and then I look at it again and don't realize it and it gets lost. So those are pain points on maybe the team that is performing the process. Talk to me a little bit about what those things cause problems with for the end user, the person who's experiencing the process.
Yeah, so maybe I'm a user that's submitting a request for something. I might not even know what these folks need to know about this. I might not know where to go to ask for this information and to request something from these folks. So, I may even not know the words to describe what I need. So if I were to submit something like this, I would want something guided and something helpful that gives me context of what they're looking for from me.
Okay. So when I think of the problems, I think of it could be slow. It could be a black hole. Something gets completely lost and I never hear back. I have no idea if anybody received my request in the first place. From a reviewer or processing standpoint and dealing with those requests, let's say you need more information from the end user, right? What's the process for?
How do you send it back?
How do you send it back? Say, I need more details, right? Or how do you ultimately find a similar request that maybe has been approved
in the past?
In the past, like, oh, we did this before. I know we did this before, but I don't know who we did it for, right? So all sorts of things that could be pain points on both sides of that.
And in this one, I think the one that you guys are talking about, it's actually like a multi-step approval. So maybe I'm the person that receives it and I do one part of it. Now I have to hand it off to somebody else. How do I do that? Do I email that to them to get them to start it? How does that work?
Which there's all kinds of problems there with expectations about like the users actually understanding the process soup to nuts and following through and doing it the right way, which is a training challenge, right? There's all kinds of problems with that.
Yep.
which there are tools now, fortunately, that you can solve those problems with.
And just to kind of give some perspective about what we have seen generically in the industry, a scenario like this is ripe for improvement, right? Like this is something that could be a process that might take a month, 2 months even, in a very unorganized fashion or even a semi-automated fashion. But we've seen those things drop down to a week, under a week in regards to being able to solution just by doing some of the things we're going to talk about. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. And there are variations of along the path to digitizing something like this. So what we were talking about is like Stone Age, like shared mailbox scenario. 10 years ago, you might have been using something like InfoPath and SharePoint Workflow if you're in the Microsoft world for something like that. But even that now is being phased out, if not already, it's going to be if you're using it. And so there are better tools for that. And even in that scenario, there were challenges there as well. It's kind of an old process, didn't have all of the bells and whistles, as it
wasn't
were.
very integrated. It wasn't
very
kind of
integrated.
all on its own. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So anything else we want to talk about from a setup perspective and kind of setting the stage for what the business problem is?
I think the only other thing that I would say is that's a pretty generic problem. We're trying to describe something that's common to a lot of organizations. But if you have some other problem that's maybe a little bit more specific or unique to you, our hope is that this challenge maps onto your problem.
We're talking about it in a very specific way to try to help people understand, because it's hard to talk very generically about these things and not mention any sort of business case.
Or it's hard to talk specifically about 200 different things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Because they're all a little bit different.
In a 30-minute podcast.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So now we're going to move into the other part of kind of this first section, which is let's talk about how you solve this problem. So we know what the business case is, or the usage scenario is. I have an IT request process. I get that in. Someone needs to review it. Maybe they need to go out and get review terms of service or whatever that might be for the software. They're going to pass it off to somebody for approval. It might be 2 or 3 different people. They either approve or reject it, send it back to the submitter, and either they start getting the tool or the software, or it
goes to procurement.
It goes to procurement, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's the process. Let's talk about solutions. So Michaela, you want to take a point on that?
Yeah, so if I think just within Microsoft, we have so many different tools we could leverage. And I think that's the fun aspect of all of this, is there is some room for creativity. So say we want to use SharePoint, we have SharePoint lists. We can add rows in there and create a table that's going to track all of this for us. We could add a status column so we know where things are at a glance. We see everything right there. We could use Microsoft Forms to collect the info from folks. And then maybe we stick it in a SharePoint list. Maybe we're using Azure DevOps. There's so many different ways you could track all of this. My personal favorite, of course, is going to be Dataverse with a model-driven app. And so we can go from something that's free and quick to build all the way up to something that is polished and kind of handles a lot of this process for us and has more automation tied into it and is maybe a more mature solution than something that is, a little faster to build, but it gets our users where they need to be sooner.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a second. Mike has some content already. There's a blog article. I think we've had a podcast about this topic, about the free versus the paid solutions. In this case, if you're doing 1 request a year, it's probably not, you might not even want to automate this thing, right? But if you're doing 2,000 of these a year, 3,000 of these a year, you're a large organization that has this happening, frequently. Would you even consider SharePoint? Would that be where you would head with it?
I mean, I think in that scenario where you get 1,000 of them, it's kind of a no-brainer, and I would encourage people to go back and watch my video. I did a little math lesson there. Generally speaking, the cost of licenses for a Dataverse connected app are worth it if it's mission critical, or if you're dealing with like thousands of requests. Like that's kind of a no-brainer. There is a cost associated to how many users you have using the app, but that's pretty simple math that I show you how to do in that video.
Sweet. Okay. So now we know what the business process is. We know that we're going to be using some of the paid tools. So we're going to, talk in Dataverse and some other things. Who wants to take me, on a short walkthrough of the technologies and how it might fit into building a solution to solve this problem?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of the beauty of the Power Platform is it integrates so seamlessly into all of these Microsoft products. So maybe you're communicating in Teams and you need to reference different things that are in Dataverse. You can have a flow that will post something to someone in Teams, or you're using approvals within Microsoft Power Platform, and you're sending someone an approval, approve, reject, and you can link that back to a Dataverse row, and then you can integrate that into Outlook as well. And so it can tie everything together.
Okay, so your core is the Dataverse, which is where all your data is going to be. You might do some things with Teams to kind of communicate. What about the reporting? I know you guys talked about one of the benefits is being able to report on the data. What tools and how would that look in this solution?
Well, so one of the keys there is that in this scenario, we're talking about Dataverse, which just to point out to everybody, that's a well-structured relational data source.
Yep.
So think of traditional like SQL
SQL,
Server or something
Oracle.
like that, right? You've got some rock solid data that you can pull, and hopefully it's well structured because you got somebody that knows a little bit about what they're doing in putting those tables together. But then you can connect directly to it with a tool like Power BI. And you could publish that Power BI report right up to a workspace that people can access, or you could even embed a report from Power BI in a model-driven app or in a Canvas app to give users some insight into what's actually going on, or to give admin users the ability to track how long it takes for something to go through the process, or how many requests are currently in process and how many have been approved and things like that.
You mentioned a Canvas app. Why would I use a Canvas app when I can just use a model app? If I use a Canvas app, I could do it for free. What's the point? What's the value?
Well, so the Canvas app will give you a little bit more ability to be very prescriptive in how you let your users interact with the data and engage with the data. So you can be that way with a model-driven app, but it's a little bit more, it's data-centered. And so you're going to get forms, and they're mobile-friendly. You can access the model-driven app on a mobile device, but the Canvas app is going to give you, if you really want a wizard-like ability to guide somebody through the process of filling out a form or a request, it'll give you that capability. And it'll have a few other, I guess, they call it Canvas app for a reason. It's like you're painting on a canvas. Give you some more ability to kind of control the look and feel of that app for your end users. And if you want something that's even more geared toward mobile format, right? A Canvas app is going to be
okay.
a
So,
better option.
So if it's really important for my end users to submit this thing in a mobile app, or if I want to have more control, really make the wizard experience nice, Canvas app. Even though I'm working with Dataverse,
Right.
Canvas app.
You're still going to
might be a
need the
piece.
Dataverse license because they're accessing
Sure.
Dataverse.
Yep.
But
Okay. Talk to me about the approvals. We haven't talked about that at all. What is this approval process that maybe before I was sending an email to a person, getting an email back, maybe storing it in a Word document? How does that work today?
So you can use the built-in standard approvals is what it's called in Power Platform. And so you can send someone an approval request where you have maybe a title and some information about it, and you can send them a link to get more info on this request. And then they have a button they can press, accept or reject. You can customize it as much as you want. And so it's all built into maybe an automation and a process where then you receive their input and then you can process that itself. You could also use something like the tasks table within Dataverse to do this as well. And they can respond on those too.
I think on the approvals front, I would add that it's a standard, tracked, secure, documented method, right? It can't really be tampered with if you do it right. As opposed to your own homegrown, like I'm going to put something in a table, or I'm going to send an email and track a response to an email or something like that. It's a more standard way of creating and tracking approval requests.
Is the approval process, you mentioned tasks as well, is the approval process, standard approval process, is that what you guys see most of the time? And that's the tool in the tool belt you pull the most for that type of thing?
It's what I like to use. It's my first go-to. There are scenarios where it doesn't quite fit. You can customize approvals, so you can have the simple approve, deny, or accept, reject option, but you can also come up with your own custom options, right? Put it on hold, for example. is a potential response, which could have a specific outcome in your process depending on what you need to implement. So you can customize it to a great extent. What we've seen, what we deal with a lot is multi-stage approvals. There is a mechanism within an approval itself that you can make it multi-stage, but it is not dynamically configurable as easy. Like once you start that approval, let's say in Power Automate, and you've got those stages, they're just what they are.
They are what they are.
You can't inject somebody into the second stage of the approval depending on the first person's response, for example. So in those scenarios, we come up with custom processes to deal with multiple stages.
Cool. Okay, so I think we have painted a picture. So in this new process, instead of an email, they come in through a Canvas app. So this user comes in and they submit a request in a Canvas app. That Canvas app walks them through the things they need to get. They fill out the information. They click submit. It goes into a Dataverse table. That Dataverse table starts to trigger some flows to say, hey, we got a new request. You need to start looking at it. You're the first step in the process. Go do this thing. They start to approve that, manage that, all the way through to where it's either approved or rejected. And then you've got Power BI reports and Teams messaging and some other things going on to kind of orchestrate that process and monitor that process. So Power BI to monitor what's going on, and Teams, et cetera, to go, communicate about that and allow people to kind of collaborate on that process. Sound about right?
Sounds right. One other benefit of the Canvas app, if you choose to use it, is you can use the push notification feature.
Oh, right into the Canvas app.
Right into the Canvas app. So if somebody's got the Canvas app on their mobile device, they can receive that push notification.
Feels like a modern built-in app.
It's close.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think that's really great. Let's talk about that. We got this new scenario. We built it. We spent the time. We got this app built. It was super easy because everything's low code and super simple. And what are the benefits I get just from that? We're not talking about AI yet. That's next. I don't have that in here, but what are the benefits that I got out of that?
So we've closed the loop or closed the holes on a lot of the things, like the process was slow. Nobody knows where my request is, so the black holes are gone. I think the biggest gains, though, are we have all of the data. We're tracking it in a structured relational data store, which is something that we probably didn't have before, either because it was in some free solution or it was in a shared mailbox or in multiple people's mailboxes, right? But now it's in one place where we can actually report on it, quantify the results. So now we can actually measure whether or not the process is getting better. If there's still a problem in the process, we can pretty easily find out where that problem is by simply being able to measure those things.
Okay. We've gotten some efficiency gains. It was obviously better than where we were before. But when we started, AI wasn't available. We didn't have Copilot. We didn't have any of these features. Now that I have Copilot, let's start talking about some of the ways that you might think about applying that to this problem in a way that it kind of takes it to the next level, closes some gaps maybe you didn't think you could close before, or maybe weren't something you thought about previously before you had this technology and this capability.
Yeah, so there's a few areas that I can think of now that we have Copilot, and it's some simple things like instead of the user using a Canvas app, we could give them access to an agent where they could have a conversation and say, I'd really like to
request.
Yeah, I'd really like to use this software. It could help them gather the information to fill out the request because we have a structured form. We have data that we have inputs that we know that the reviewers need. And so they could have a conversation with an agent that could then go retrieve information about that device or that software and attempt to fill the form out for them. Like that would be one area. We can even help with a pre-submission check. Like if they pick a piece of software that we already know about that somebody said, nope, you can't use it, we can be like, hey, no, this is denied right off the bat, right? So those would be areas.
Or you can submit it to if something's changed, but it was denied a year ago.
Right. So there are some of those areas that once we have that data that we didn't have before, we can allow Copilot to have access to that data and pre-answer some questions.
How is that different than building into a Canvas app logic that says, oh, somebody put this name of this software in, I'm just going to go look through the things and I'm just going to do it myself. What's the benefit of using AI? Because I can imagine, I'm a developer, I can imagine a scenario where I could develop a solution like that.
Yeah, so I would say first that is possible, and that's something that is already being done, right? So if I'm searching for a piece of software, well, I have a database, a catalog full of software. Look it up, right? And oh, that looks like the one. But then there are going to be other scenarios where, with software, there's always new versions of the software, and the EULAs might have changed. So that's something that often gets reviewed. And so there are like various requirements there. And that's something that AI can analyze, for example, the documentation about that software or about those devices and tell you if, this is actually different. This is a completely different request because something has changed about that software. Maybe it's a different version. Maybe the documentation for the software, like that you supplied, is different, or that the bot found out there on the internet is different. And that can help in the review process as well to highlight, we think this is different, right? This isn't the same thing.
Okay. What's another area? What's another part of that process that AI is just waiting for AI to kind of transform and help?
Well, I think the next step after the user submits their request, it's going to undergo this review process. And so can AI pre-review it of highlighting things in the EULA that we might disagree with or might be concerns, things like that? Or can it maybe suggest an alternative? So we have this other product that you might want to use instead, things like that to help now the review side of things, the back end side.
Okay, so reviewing the EULA is trying to do some of that analysis for the end user, not necessarily doing it completely, but like pointing to some things that maybe they want to review rather than having to manually review the entire EULA or manually reviewing, the features or whatever might be on the product.
Exactly. Okay. Yep. And that's a major concern that a lot of folks have right now is we still want the human involvement, even if we have AI as a tool to enhance this.
So what would you guys say to someone who's looking at this and going, well, I already pay for Microsoft 365 Copilot or maybe ChatGPT Pro for all my users. Can't they just go use that and say, hey, tell me about this EULA and give me recommendations of how this doesn't apply? What's wrong with doing that? And then I don't have to spend all the money on this integration with my app.
Well, they can, but I would say that they're missing out on all of the valuable content that you may have collected in that system over the years. And what that really points to is whatever those other tools that they might use aren't using the same grounding or aren't using common grounding that needs to be used for all of the requests that go through this process, right? Otherwise, it's 800 different processes.
Yeah, so everybody who's using it might do it a little differently or might not have access to all of the information that
guaranteed they won't have access to all of the information.
Okay. What else? What's another area that AI could potentially help with this process for, let's say, the person who's administering this and managing this process?
Well, once you have this data, like that's just one more way that a tool like Copilot can be used is to go and do an investigation, find out what's going on with that process. You could have some Power BI reports that tell you how long it takes on average to complete the process, but you could have a conversation with an agent that
understands your data,
and you could simply say, how long does it typically take for this to happen? How long did it take in January? How long does it take today, right?
Yeah.
And get those questions in a user-friendly, a conversational way, which is useful.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I think we've articulated some ways that you could improve the process. Let's talk a little bit about whether or not that is what you should do, right? Should I be looking at every business process like this and say, AI is the best thing, everybody's talking about it, let's go apply it?
Yeah, I think that's a question that a lot of folks are starting to ask because it is so exciting. People want to use it, but is it always the best use of the tool? And so I think if you have something that is one-to-one where you have data that you're going to just input into something, you don't need to analyze it, transform it in any way, is AI the tool to leverage there? I don't know. It comes with some cost to it. There's licensing aspects. It depends on how much you use Copilot agents. That, if you use it more, you're going to pay more. And then it's also the information that it hands back to you. Is it quality? Is it trustworthy? Do we have to still review what the AI is handing us? And so we need to figure those things out.
And does that provide a benefit if I still have to review it anyways? What's the real value? What's the real return on investment?
I think that's the biggest one is uncertainty or risk perceived risk and liability associated with taking action on the responses that you got from the bot. And depending on like an IT request process, probably not life or death. I can think of some other scenarios that might be life or death that you might not want to trust the robot.
Yeah.
Or you can't afford to trust the robot, so you got to review it anyways. I think there are areas though that it helps, right? Like high level areas, decision support, process automation, right? Those are some big ones in assisting the user. But you just need to know where the user needs to draw the line, right? What they need to look at. And honestly, in an agent, you could implement logic that says, I don't know what to do here. You make the decision or escalate it, right?
The confidence of whether or not the quality that you have.
Right.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things you can do. The only thing that I would add to that is that the more precise you need it to be, the more expensive it is to do, right? If you need it to be 100% accurate every time, you should look at that as being, a more expensive thing to do. It's going to take more time, energy, etc. So,
That's when I call the Matt bot.
not for sale. You can't subscribe, nor would you want to. So let's wrap this up. Obviously, if you have a business process, the first thing you should do is automate it. If you're still working in email and Teams messages, etc., there's not really much that the AI is going to do that's transformative to your business.
Not on its own.
You're going to want to put that into Dataverse, into Canvas apps and Power BI, and use all those things. From there, you can add AI in for things like smarter workflows, less manual work to get these things started. Proactive insights, so analyzing something ahead of when you might look at it. Those are all things that we've talked about. And you really shouldn't just assume that the business process is going to benefit from AI, from what you were just saying. You really should look at that and assess whether or not there's going to be value to that. Does that make sense? Did I cover everything that we kind of talked about?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this was fun. It was a great time, change of pace. Mitch isn't running the show this time around on the podcast. Hopefully I did a good job. Mike, Michaela, thank you for the time, and hope everybody enjoyed the podcast.
I think the only thing I want to add is I want to encourage listeners out there, if you are listening, to take what you've learned here and think about what workflows in your organization this might apply to. So whether or not you have a process that needs help and is in the Stone Age and needs to grow up a little bit before you can apply AI, or if you have something that's already in place, you've got some data that you're tracking, whether or not you can apply something like Copilot to it. Like, think of those areas where you can apply it. And we'd love to hear back from you if you have any cool examples.
Send us some examples. We're always looking for interesting ones.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.